most of our audience is global and most of our big non-TEDx talks are in English. We have always invested in subtitles, transcripts, like you can read the talk in many different languages. So we're like, okay, how do we take it one step further? We launched an AI dubbing initiative. We partnered with a company called Pangaea, who have been great. And they do this really realistic translation of the content, but the realism comes from the lip syncing and the voice cloning.
Muchas gracias por ayudarnos.
Dubbing, at least from my perspective, it's always viewed as super corny. It doesn't resonate. It's very expensive. And so this is a way to unlock a lot of value. The dubbed content on average is performing 2 to 3 times better than the pre-dubbed versions. The reviews have been fantastic. And for us, meeting our audience where they are in terms of making ideas accessible, but it's also reaching people we would have previously never reached. Like if someone's on a feed and they see something in English, a lot of people who don't speak English will just scroll along. Now we're able to capture people who might have not even discovered a TED Talk or know what TED is because it was never in their language.
Welcome to LaunchPod, the show from LogRocket, where we sit down with top product and digital leaders. We all know TED Talks, but behind the scenes, TED is undergoing a massive product transformation to adapt to a post-AI media landscape. In this episode, Tricia Maia, head of product at TED, pulls back the curtain on how they're solving the discovery crisis facing digital media today. Tricia tells us why views are dead, explaining why TED is abandoning top-of-funnel traffic as their North Star metric and shifting focus to depth, completion rates, and account signups to combat volatile search algorithms. AI that actually scales, how TED is using advanced AI auto-dubbing and not just subtitles to clone speakers' voices into other languages, driving 2 to 3x better performance, and the gap strategy, the challenge of connecting a decentralized ecosystem of free users and volunteers at TEDx with an ultra-premium live experience that can cost attendees up to $12,000 per ticket. So here's our episode with Tricia Maia. All right, Tricia, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I'm stoked here because, TED, I've been a longtime fan of TED Talks, which you're head of product over at TED, but previous to that, you were at Alpha Sites, Verizon, Braze, you kind of been all over. We're going to talk about the media journey that TED's been going through and really the world in a post-AI world. There's a lot of media companies facing the same thing. But maybe before we jump into that, could you give us a kind of like TLDR on how you got here and how'd you wind up running product at TED?
Yeah. So I guess I've been in product for about 15 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what product management was. I barely was interested in tech, to be honest. I studied economic development and I sort of fell into this agile business owner PM sort of role at a startup. And I loved it. I loved working with engineers and designers and customers and really just unpacking their problems and building creative solutions towards them. And over the years, I, as you said, meandered among different growth stage startups. Verizon was very different from a lot of my previous experiences. And now at TED, I feel like I'm coming sort of full circle to my economic development and sort of NGO nonprofit mission-oriented interests, my student years, and merging it with product and tech. And so, yeah, it's been an exciting ride.
Yeah, TED, given the background for NGOs, the kind of nonprofit side, TED is a great kind of juxtaposition of both those things, right? Like plays very much in the tech world and all that. But I don't think you could find anyone, in most of the adjacent industries who don't follow it and aren't fans. But at the same time, like you said, it's a nonprofit that has a lot of those elements and you get to do a lot of good around education, which is fun.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. So like we can just dive right into it, right? The thing we're going to talk about is, not just TED, but the kind of the entire media landscape over the past couple of years post AI, but even before that, like consumer behaviors were changing. Yeah. And, things like TED and other media properties are seeing just pretty big change in how you operate kind of digital media and media in general. Do you want to maybe walk us through what the journey's been like?
Yeah, definitely. So just to sort of put TED into context, because most people, the number one question I get is, what is product at TED? Technology, entertainment, and design. And so technology is number one, but what is tech? And like, what do we do? So I feel like the best way to describe it is across sort of 3 different areas. One is our events business and conferences. So most TED Talks people I've seen have been filmed at either one of our flagship events or one of our local TEDx events. And so it's like, the big red circle, sort of iconic TED design. Our teams spend a lot of time not just curating those events, but our team works on the technology behind it. So how do people register or purchase tickets? When you're at a conference, how do they check in? What are the different staff tools, attendee apps, like anything around the technological enablement of the event? So the events business is sort of, separate but related to our media business. And that's what I'll talk a little bit about next. But that's, how do we get our talks that are often, again, filmed at conferences out into the world and out to our global audience. And it was and is important for TED to make those free, easily accessible. And so a lot of our work is just, how do we build our own platforms, our website and our app, but how do we meet people where they are on YouTube, on social media, on emerging platforms that, more and more people are accessing. We want to get our ideas out to as many people as possible. So how we think about that, how we monetize that has definitely changed. And I'll get into that. But the third pillar I would say is more around our sort of like impact initiatives and programs, all the things that underscore our events and our media, but are really leaning into our mission driven nature. So we have a social impact fund. We have a fellows program. We manage lots of amazing volunteers across translators, across TEDx organizers. So there's a lot of programs and initiatives that help support TED's mission that have tech needs and product needs as well. They all need websites. They need community management. They have data needs. And so a lot of our time is spent with them as well. But for the media business in particular, we're not the only ones, but it's been sort of like a roller coaster in terms of how people are discovering content. So it's not only being on the platforms where people are, but how do you get discovered? Like some of it is sort of black box of algorithms of different social platforms or YouTube. Like, what do we need to do to rank highly in search or get people to access our stuff for our owned and operated platforms, our website, our app? How do we improve our SEO? And what do we do about, AI generated search and how people are finding content in new ways? And so we have predominantly, at least for our own platforms, like really relied on search and direct traffic. And those have honestly been challenging over the years with all of the different changes, to increase competition, new content out there. And so for us, it's really about coming back to what's the value we're providing the world? How do we get that message out there and hoping that people come to us, but also trying to not game the system, but make sure we're keeping up with the times. And yeah, there's a lot of dependencies, I would say, on third parties that make the job difficult, but, rewarding in many ways as well when you do get it right.
Funny because for TED, it's the balance of you obviously need the viewers, you need the engagement, you need to, have some level of monetization. You need to sustain the organization and bring in funding and money. But at the same time, like there's a big mission element of get content out there and don't restrict and ensure that you're spreading ideas, which I have to assume is a little bit of a blessing, a little bit of a curse in that, if you're a strictly for-profit media organization, you kind of need to get people back to your owned sites because you don't have the mission element. For TED, there's the element of you can fulfill that mission and still run into issues around kind of getting people to your own sites. So you have a little bit more optionality, but maybe not always in the same way. I guess, how do you balance that kind of concept of the mission of spreading ideas and at the same time, like trying to get people back to some of the core platforms?
I think traditionally we really relied on an advertising business model to fund our efforts because we never paywalled our content, and we likely will never, I guess, as part of our mission. And that was like great in the good days, like when traffic was flowing and on all platforms, including our own, getting, more views, more eyeballs was always really helpful. But again, as search has changed, as discovery across different platforms has changed, we realize that sort of being at the mercy of a lot of, decisions and technologies that are out of our control is really risky. And so we, over the past few years, have thought about how do we think about monetization in new ways. Yes, advertising is still an important part of it, but we have increasingly leaned into our membership program, which is basically people can donate to TED and get certain benefits, exclusive events, you're part of a community, where that can go. I think we have really exciting ideas for how to grow that, but that's one element. We've started to develop new products that we can maybe monetize in different ways. So games is another example. We started launching some new games a few years ago, and we've grown a very active user base around them. So diversification has really been important, and not resting on our laurels in terms of how we were making money back in the day. But regardless, our our site, our app have always been and will continue to be a really strategic area. We can, of course, advertise on other platforms. YouTube is a really big partner for us. We have podcasts, we have social platforms, but there's a brand element to TED.com and the app. Like what we see with our partners is they don't necessarily advertise on our site for pure traffic, although we do have a sizable, user base, but they think about in terms of brand alignment. And so like they want to be affiliated with the TED brand. It's a little bit, you could do something a little bit more custom, a little bit more differentiated on our properties than maybe you could do on a third-party platform. So I think that value prop is great because it's not necessarily dependent on pure traffic. And so that's, our brand and upholding our brand is really important. And then, once people are in our ecosystem, we can just understand more about them. And so then we can target different initiatives. Maybe they're right to be a translator or a TEDx organizer, or maybe they might be really interested in our membership offering. The more that we have understand and know about our users, the more that we can target our offerings to them. So I think that has always been sort of in the back of our minds as something important. But more recently, for all of our teams, product, marketing, et cetera, we've realized as the big top of funnel number maybe slows, how do we lean into growing that depth of connection with the audiences we do have? And we feel the best place for that is our site, is our app. But we do know those other platforms are super important for reach. And how do we connect them to sort of get the best of both worlds?
Yeah. And so kind of question I was wondering that goes back to maybe earlier in the conversation was, what does product mean at TED? And you kind of there talked about building community and driving views and it's a pretty wide remit of things we're just going through. What parts of that fall under, the product team, and like, how do you guys think about, driving more people into community or on the owned sites and converting them, like you said, into TEDx organizers even, or some of the other elements there?
Yeah, so functionally, maybe is one lens to look at it. So within product, we have product management, so product manager scoped for different areas, even the web, the app, events, like what is the scope of work? What are we prioritizing? How are we leading the engineering teams? And we have design, who obviously works very closely with the product managers on understanding user needs, fleshing out the experience. We have data and analytics, so understanding user behavior, reporting for the org. It's all sort of like we're a small team, but all of those functions are sort of intrinsically related. And then community support. So when people reach out to us, they're having issues or they want to give feedback, even at our events, the team that leads the community support, we are part of the product team. So we see product very broad in terms of functions. And then of course we, are part of like the larger engineering team. I co-lead the tech team with our CTO. And so we're very like close-knit org. So functionally, we're very broad. We also work on a lot of different platforms. And I think like the way that we think about it is we have to compartmentalize product in some ways. Like our events team, our events PM is thinking about very different problems than our consumer-oriented audiences, like our web PM or our mobile PM. So I'd say we sort of like loosely divide along like the events line, the consumer product line, and maybe even like our infrastructure platform. Those are sort of how we divide and conquer. But I would say that the teams that are working most on some of these questions are consumer-oriented squads, web, membership, those sorts of things.
If you're enjoying LaunchPod, the best way you can show support is simple. Follow the show so you never miss an episode, leave us a quick review to help more product leaders find it, and share this episode with a friend or colleague who'd get value from it. Every follow, review, and share really helps us grow. It seems like this is not a novel thing of kind of product taking a wider remit of, getting more into the what would be traditionally considered like go-to-market side of things. Like you said, you work closely with the CTO on running the tech team as well. And, at some level, we're seeing bigger and bigger companies look a lot more like early stage startups. And I can't help but think that has something to do with just the speed and change driven by AI and even like post-COVID and the whole ZERP period kind of coming to a close. How do you handle it? How do you handle like an ever widening aperture?
Yeah, that definitely resonates. And I mean, I will add, because we're a nonprofit, we have to do more with less. So it's like, we're content at this platform, but you're not getting new people. So just like figure it out. So as cliche as it sounds, I mean, AI has helped us. Like we have a lot of interesting conversations with leadership, or like, how are we using AI, or like, how can we streamline with AI? And it's like, the biggest argument I feel like I can make is like, okay, look at what we did 12 months ago, 24 months ago, and look how many people we have. We have roughly the same amount, but we're able to show higher output. Like, that's the best. I've seen even our designers and our PMs like use tools that we already paid for, like Figma, for example, and using a tool like Figma Make to just like prototype different solutions that previously we might have needed an engineer for, or a designer would have spent a week creating an interactive prototype. So for us and for me, it's really important that we are keeping a finger on the pulse of different tools that are available to us, that if there is a training need, I'm, fighting for some even small budget for the team to be able to upskill and do things a little bit more cross-functionally. And I think because we're small, because we're a closely knit team, we don't have a lot of this mentality of this is my job, this is your job. Like, the lines have always sort of been blurred because we do operate like a startup. So people taking on sort of more and more responsibility across what previously spanned different domains, whether it's product, engineering, design, that has been really natural for us. But yeah, I would say like those trends resonate with me. And maybe I'm biased because I do come from more of a startup background. Like, that's just how I work. So maybe I'm imparting my worldview onto the teams I lead now. But I find like the most successful teams, no matter how big or small, are going to have to adapt to that, new worldview.
I think just for background, I think we have probably a lot of, things we've run into with business like this in common where, at one point, LogRocket, we were operating probably not quite the magnitude of TED, but we ran a blog that I think was generating in the realm of, 8-figure traffic monthly. But then AI has really changed how people behave online. And we've just seen a lot of that kind of online, owned blog media is not quite as easy. But, TED has continued to succeed in the media landscape. Adaptability is great, but at some point you have to think about goaling and what does actually success even look like. How has that evolved over this time to ensure that you're still even shooting for the right goal?
No, totally. Yeah, I think honestly, I think that's something we're working through right now. We have always, at least from the media perspective, have always been focused on talk views, like how many people are like starting a talk, and that's like the basic metric beyond sessions or whatnot. It's been good in some ways, like that's directly correlated to ad revenue and other things that we are monetizing on today. But in terms of impact and in terms of where the world's going, we are sort of at this crossroads right now where we're like, is this the North Star metric? Is that what we want to reach? Because we have seen, even with changing user behavior, just for an example, people moving to short form content and that resonating more with them. Obviously, we have short form and now in our app, our site, YouTube, elsewhere. Our social platforms are very successful because they are, predominantly short form driven. But is like someone starting a talk, like, are they getting through the talk? Are they getting through half of it? Like, completion rate has always been like a secondary metric for us. But that, for example, is one of the things where like maybe we should be elevating that. Is someone not just interested in the title or topic of a talk, but are they interested in the content enough to consume the whole idea, whether it's a 1-minute version or a 20-minute version? Repeat usage, retention in product circles. That's always like, oh, well, duh, you have to get people to come back. But like, just because product wants to focus on it doesn't mean it's important to the org. And so like, we have to sort of, work with stakeholders across the org to understand these metrics and say, wait, maybe this is not the main thing. Also, like, there are all these tides that we are fighting. Like, maybe top of funnel traffic is not the thing we should be going after. Maybe we should be, taking the traffic we get and converting them into someone completing a talk and then coming back next month and signing up for an account or signing up for a newsletter. Like, those are the things we control. And those are the things that actually have deeper impact on the business, on the users, than at, cursory metric we measured for, 15 years. And so it's something we talk about for a while, but I actually think this year we're like, okay, guys, things have really shifted and we need to measure progress differently. And so I'd say that's sort of the shift we're thinking about. How do we move from sort of those, not just vanity metrics, but sort of, metrics of yesteryear into something that's a little bit more controllable, more meaningful for our audiences. And, what that looks like, we could go, there's nuance in terms of how you measure that exactly, but that depth of engagement with our users is something that we're starting to prioritize a little bit more of, like, how many people click this talk.
Has it become more important to kind of drive people into membership or even something deeper like, organizing a
Yeah.
TEDx or something like that? Like, is that have a
Yeah.
higher priority now?
I mentioned earlier the data piece is really important. So understanding people, like who's coming to the site, what are they interested in, what they may be open to. We don't know that with anonymous traffic. Ultimately, people need to tell us who they are, what they want, and then we can serve them the right thing. And so,
Yeah.
for example, next year, we just had a call with our marketing team earlier today. Like, I really want to explicitly move away from top views to, for example, like account signups or percent of authenticated sessions as a main goal, because the marketing team needs that to be able to understand not just upsell things, but understand cross-platform user behavior. Like, a question I get often is like, what's the relative behavior of someone on the site versus a newsletter? How many, like, what's the, share across different platforms? I'm like, I don't know. If they are anonymous, I generally don't know much that I would like put any credence towards. So to even understand user behaviors better, we need to encourage them and give them the features, give them the incentives to come join us and then come back and come back again. And we have seen with different marketing campaigns, different tests we've run, when we have more targeted data, when we know something about someone, they are definitely more likely to convert to a membership or go to an event. Like, there's obviously success there, but for us, it's about getting more of our marketing to be more targeted, more of our users into that pool, because otherwise it's sort of just like throwing things against a wall and hoping they stick. And that's not effective.
Do you have the situation where, the kind of a smaller group of maybe your traffic, I guess would be the best word, is worth a, predominant amount of value to the org? Like, are members like a
Mhm.
hugely important revenue aspect of it, or what makes, I guess, driving them down the funnel that way so important to the org?
Yeah. I think the one thing we think about is, it's interesting, as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit, but like, we do sell things.
Yeah.
Our events are actually quite pricey. I mean, our
Yeah.
flagship event, I think, with starting tickets, $12,500. Like,
Whew.
it's not cheap. That's the big one. We
Well, it's a
definitely
cool event. I mean, like,
will
it's
make
a kind of
sure.
singular.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing too, is like, that's a whole other maybe topic. But anyway, my point is, like, we have that, and then we have like you know, billions of free users all over the world. There's
Right.
nothing connecting them. So something like a membership, okay, starts at $5 a month. You could donate whatever you want, but that's the start of, like, okay, they're paying something. They're
Hmm.
clearly like invested in TED's mission enough to donate something to get some benefits. We still have a big gap between $5 and $12,000. So we see it like that. Whereas if we
Yeah.
offer other things that maybe those people are more likely to maybe one day go to an event. Maybe it's not a
Yeah.
big TED event. Maybe it's a local TEDx event that costs less money, or, whatever. So it's about building that funnel of people who, also location. We have events across the globe, but sometimes, like, we have a big event in Atlanta. We have TEDx is another big conference we have. Like, maybe people aren't willing to travel internationally for that event. So we want to target our US based
Hmm.
audience. I mean, that's just an example. We have plenty of
Right.
international attendees
Yeah.
as well. But the point is, part of it is like just understanding people where they are, what they want, and, like, some events are not relevant to them, some products aren't relevant to that. But then also, a lot of people don't want to pay for anything TED has to offer, and that's completely
Mm.
fine. And, like, that is why we exist. But some people are. And so getting those people a little bit more down the funnel to eventually also, like, understand what we do better, to say, hey, actually, it would be cool to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas it's very different from watching a random video on YouTube, to your point, and, like, not making the connection of, like, why you should pay for anything at TED.
It's unlikely that someone's going to come in off of a random video on YouTube and, like you said, pay 12 grand for a ticket. But it's not unlikely that of the people coming in who are going to start a membership, some
Mhm.
portion of that are going to be the people who turn into the $12,000 ticket buyers and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you gotta plant the seeds, right?
Yeah.
I think that generally an underappreciated aspect of I think kind of what this modern amalgamation of product and go to market everything has kind of missed is there's a lot of value often, like that mid value. You have to find how to distill it out, because we similarly, like, right, when we would look at traffic to the blog, we had the core search very similar to sounds like on TED's side, but we'd get picked up in kind of these random promotion things or traffic sources that would be very cursory. And, you always get the big celebration. Like, oh, we got like 5x the traffic today that we normally get. That's incredible. But then you look the next day and where it was? It was gone. But we started to realize, can we track how many people come in that way and how many of those people are here a week later? Like, is there any effect to, like, do we convert any of those into long-term people, or do we see our own normal long-termers coming in that way too? Like, was it another way that our loyal people found us?
Right. It's a nurturing tactic, like your blog, everything your organization is doing, your podcast, like you're getting people to understand what you all do, sort of develop a relationship with you in some way so that, when they are looking for a service or a software, you're top of mind. I think it's the same thing for us. It's like, even if they don't join membership, for example, like they join a newsletter, we're in their inbox every day, every week, and they see all the cool things we're doing. And over time, they start to develop an affinity maybe for the brand that maybe opens them up to new possibilities in the future, which again is very different from someone watching a YouTube video than watching, something from a different organization. And it's just one of many things. Whereas, the importance of our, owned and operated ecosystem is getting people like gradually more comfortable with who we are and what we do. And then maybe we can deepen that relationship in the future.
I think we started to touch on events here, thinking about that, right? Like the events world is probably one of the most changed things. Basically, if you look 6 years ago, and specifically 6 years ago, but like, how does TED think, and from a like product standpoint specifically, how does that fit into the mix over there for the team? And like, what have you all needed to do to adapt to that? What's new and different that maybe wouldn't have been, 7 years ago, 6 years ago?
That's actually like when I joined TED. I joined in 2021, so it was sort of like right after the pandemic hit. And I remember just coming into like a very tumultuous environment. Like, because the event honestly was like, the cash cow of the org, like that, like sort of what funded everything else. And we couldn't rely on that anymore. Like I believe we didn't even have an event one year. It was just virtual, which is like not the same thing. And, previously, or so I've heard, is that TED literally never had to work for the events. I mean, we do a lot of work, but in terms of marketing it, like there was not like a specific marketing function.
Well, they were so prestigious. Like it was just the magnet itself.
Exactly. Like it was the brand itself and the returning users, like just sort of create this world where we had to say no to people. Like it was crazy. Like that was what we were used to. So after COVID, when people didn't feel comfortable meeting in person or sort of just like recalibrated the whole world and the event business in general, that wasn't the case any longer. And so a combination of just like that happening, increased competition with other events, like TED's brand is strong and iconic and all of that, but there are a lot of brands that are and that we're, putting on events. And so, from a marketing perspective, I know we beefed up that function in terms of how do we let people know what about our events, how to attend, all that. And we work really closely, especially from a data perspective, to give the marketing teams what they need to do that job better. But from a product perspective, it's really interesting, like the repeat behavior. It's the same for, our media business. Like we want to get people to come back. And so we feel like if we could get to them to one event, they see the magic of TED. And then we see, great retention rates from there. So I think like the awareness in the marketing is one piece, but then once they're in the funnel and they're at the door, we spend a lot of time on our attendee app, for example, TED Connect, and getting people not just to see their schedule, but to connect with other humans at the event. Like we want technology at events to always be sort of in the background. Like you don't really know what's happening, but it's facilitating everything around you. And that includes the connection piece. And so sometimes when you go to these events, maybe back in the day, it was a stronger, tighter knit community, is the same people going every year. But since we've sort of had a, quote unquote reset, we have a lot of new people coming. And so how do you connect with someone at a large event? It's a bit intimidating. And so, we've been partnering with this organization called Brain Date, where you can set up one-on-one meetings at events on different topics. Like it's an easy way to sort of get you to meet people at events. And how do we facilitate that through the app? Making sure that it jives with your schedule and that everything sort of really seamless. Like the connection community piece has been something we focus on in order to drive that retention. And in general, we're just thinking about like, there is so much noise out there, especially in the media landscape, like so much competition in terms of content. We still feel like, I mean, our content is obviously differentiated, but we feel like where we really have a special sauce is our events. So even if, it is harder to market, they're expensive to produce, like leaning into that aspect of like where people are meeting in person, sort of connecting offline, like that's something so increasingly rare in today's world. And like that aspect is something we want to sort of lean into more going forward.
It's even now kind of that we're 6 years removed from the onset of of the whole COVID thing that occurred. People have gone back and realized like, hey, I kind of miss humans, even with all the return to office and everything. People feel a lot more isolated, and there is a lot of value being placed again on in person, which I think is fantastic. And then things like this, where you can go and have a great event experience. There has been a lot, I think, a big upswing in the past couple of years of people putting on different types of events, maybe differently than we saw pre-COVID. But is it advantageous to you guys where you have the kind of audience you've built right up funnel with all the kind of other digital content you have and you have membership and you have all that kind of stuff? Has that proved to continue to be an advantage?
To be honest, no. And that's something that we are dealing with now, like our events or thinking about now strategically, like how do we move forward? So our events audience has always sort of been distinct from our digital audience. And that was okay for a while. But a big question that I have that our leadership team is asking now is like, how do we connect the dots more? And yeah, we have to recognize people are never, most of our global audience is never going to come to our flagship event. Like, that's just not happening. It's, they don't want to, they can't afford it. Like, there's many different reasons. But we also have this huge ecosystem of TEDx organizations across the world, which like, it's very interesting from my perspective. It's like this thriving global community where people are literally volunteering to put on events. We run, I think, an average of like, I don't know, a handful a day. Like, there's a lot happening.
Wow.
Yeah, like it's crazy to think about. I'm like, wait, what is happening over there? And like, how do we connect those dots? Because those events are literally in people's backyard and they don't cost nearly as much as our big events. And like, maybe that's where we lean into in terms of getting people to connect and convene and honestly be together in person and have these discussions that's much more accessible. Whether or not they ultimately ever come to our big events, it almost doesn't matter. But it's like, we have a huge network that's thriving. It's great. But like, how do we connect our digital community, or at least the portion that's interested in that, to even be aware that those things are happening? So I think a theme for us next year, it's not just how do we get more, understand more about what's happening in those events and connecting the dots, but like actively promoting it. And so that goes back to the KPI question. Like, maybe it's not about top views. Maybe it's about surfacing local TEDx events near you or connecting with like-minded people. And it's like that becomes the core driver, the thing we're trying to push, and content is a part of that. But that is something we're reckoning with now, is like, to answer your question, short answer is no. Like, there's not a big, like, what we're doing in the media space is not necessarily helping us in the event space, but how do we sort of start to bridge that gap? And I think there are different ways we could do that.
I didn't realize it was on the scale of several per day for TEDx. That's wild. Yeah. I mean, there's got to be some magic there. You're not operating something that does not have gigantic pull of appeal. If it's driving people to do that level of activity, like there's something there. Now, I want to make sure we cover one more thing, because you talked about this, I think, last time we ran into each other, and thought it was just wildly interesting, is like, speaking of kind of reaching the message to more people, AI obviously has issues where, like you said, it has changed how owned sites operate, and often in most cases, not always in a great way, where it has reduced traffic to a lot of places, but then sometimes your team is able to move faster and do more potentially with it. But the other thing I thought was really neat is all these talks that historically would have been in one language only, or you could have spent a lot of money to have a human translate it, because we all know Google Translate is that's not exactly production ready. But with the advent of some of these AI tools, you can now turn a lot of these assets from, maybe one language into almost all of the languages if you wanted. But how you do this is really neat. So can you maybe bring people up to speed real quick on what's going on here? Because this is rad.
So last year or 2 years ago, we launched an AI dubbing initiative. So yeah, most of our audience is global, and most of our, big non-TEDx talks are in English. And so we have always invested in subtitles, transcripts. Like you can read the talk in many different languages, and that's due to our amazing localization team. We have 77,000 volunteer translators, like
Wow.
huge infrastructure. So we're like, okay, how do we take it one step further? And so we partnered with a company called Pangaea, who have been great, and they do this really realistic translation of the content, but the realism comes from the lip syncing and the voice cloning, like it as if you sounded like you, Jeff, but you were speaking Spanish or Italian. I mean, I don't know if you speak those languages naturally, but like imagine you didn't
Not well.
you seem fluent. And like
Yeah.
I think dubbing, at least from my perspective, I know others, like it's always viewed as like traditional dubbing, like super corny, like it doesn't resonate, it's very expensive. And so this is a way to unlock, a lot of value. And a lot of the feedback we've gotten from users is like, I didn't even know that this talk was originally in English. Like it was so realistic that it removes that barrier. People don't have to read the transcript or subtitles. They can access it in their own native language, which isn't really key. And we've seen that in results too. Like the dubbed content on average is performing 2 to 3 times better than, the pre-dubbed versions. Like people are also doing more, they're saving more, they're engaging more. The reviews have been fantastic. And for us, it's like, it's meeting our audience where they are in terms of making ideas accessible in a different and new way. But it's also reaching people we would have previously never reached. Like if someone's on a feed and they see something in English, a lot of people who don't speak English will just scroll along. Now we're able to sort of capture people who might have not even discovered a TED Talk or know what TED is because it was never in their language. And so that has been really a key initiative for us. I feel like the next frontier is now starting to take some of those, gems of the TEDx world that are in all these languages that we don't even know are great talk maybe, and translating them into English. But yeah, it's been a really key initiative for us.
That would be, I think, super rad. Is how can you kind of leverage the TEDx from all over the world? Speaking of events, a lot of events we put on, we have a guy named Ajia Desway, who's incredibly accomplished CPO, who's been at all sorts of Type Forum, Twitter, and Atlassian and stuff like that. He raised an important point at one point that when it talks about like, oh, all the world's knowledge is now available online. Generally, that's actually a subset. It's the subset that has been ingested into digital, but there's a lot of localized knowledge and stuff like that are in Africa or some areas of India that probably are nowhere online and could be very useful. And so just broadening that net used to be, like you said, very expensive, and then you do run into like the whole dubbing thing. Sure, I can listen to it, but if you watch it, like you do notice the mouth being off takes you out of it. The voices are always terrible. And so like, but it's these little things that maybe you don't think about that really do making it seem like it's, for you, for me, versus just like, oh, someone who did this as an afterthought. It does change how you engage with it.
Yeah, exactly. For us, quality is always important. And so because we have this amazing translator, basically base of volunteers that are helping us, we're also feeding the AI human quality transcripts because we have them. So it's literally from start to finish. This is, I don't want to say perfect translations, but they're like damn near perfect. Like we don't release anything until it is, which is maybe a flaw of ours. So I think our biggest opportunity now is just like getting more talk translated and dubbed. And we have, I believe, like 50 now. And so we have a library of, 4,000 talks, much more if you count the TEDx library. So that's sort of the next frontier for us. But again, also consent is very important to us. So we will never dub something if a speaker hasn't given us our consent. So that's a whole other process with legal and all of that, which is the right thing to do. The technology hasn't necessarily been holding us back. It's just our attention to quality and our, for right or for wrong, our belief in user consent.
It's good to do the right stuff there. There's a huge opportunity, but at the same time, good to kind of balance them both. But no, I mean, I think that's a really cool piece. It does open up now a whole bunch of new, like you said, going back, we'll bring it full circle. Going back to the mission is spreading ideas. That just greatly exponentially increases the TED's ability to do that, which, if that's the mission, that's pretty beautiful. So as much as I'd love to, dig in and nerd out about how that works, and maybe a different day we can, I do think I have to give you back to TED now. So thank you so much for coming on. This is a blast. I feel like I learned a lot and got great insight into TED, the organization, And if you know anyone who has like tickets to one of the events, like one of those $12,000 tickets,
Okay.
let me know.
Well,
But no, thank you so much for coming on. This is a blast.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
All right.